Hey everyone, welcome back to Maritime SoftwareHub, the People Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Ryan Dooley, the CCO at Voltic Shipping. Ryan, welcome. I'm super excited to have you on the show. And today we're going to be talking about launching and scaling a modern shipping line. So thanks for joining us, Ryan. I'd love it if you could just tell us a bit more about your background and introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Callum. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to be able to join and chat a little bit about Voltic and yeah, talk a little bit about the industry. So my background, very briefly for everyone, is I'm from the U.S. here, from Boston, Massachusetts native. I went to the maritime academies here in the States, a couple of different ones, Kings Point down in New York, as well as Mass Maritime. I've worked in the maritime industry my entire career, coming out after school and working for lines like Hamburg Süd, Yang Ming, a small domestic line called Sea Star Line, and then also working in the 3PL world and transitioning into technology, selling software, decarbonization software specifically, as well as other platforms and maritime data, vessel tracker data, and the like. So I've got a fairly interesting arc of a career working for the legacy lines, working for the 3PLs, and then into the technology space, but always with a maritime flavor.
Love it. Yeah, you've got a really fascinating background and great perspective from the hands-on kind of side of shipping as well as the technology side and obviously the leadership sort of function you've been doing throughout your career. So really interesting conversation, and especially what you're building at Voltic, really one I'm looking forward to. And anything kind of decarbonisation focused within the shipping world is right very much up our alley and what we're looking at in terms of a hiring capacity. So yeah, I'd love it if you could perhaps maybe what kind of led you to Voltic?
Absolutely. Voltic is an interesting beast here because it was founded originally by a group of guys out of MIT, some PhDs, our CEO, Prosser Cathay. He has multiple degrees from MIT that he was able to achieve in only a few years. So, I mean, we've got a brilliant group of guys. They were able to crack the code on how to utilize solar power to create electric powered vessels. The thing is that they did not specifically understand exactly how the maritime space worked, as a business. They understood the ships, they understood how the power works, they understood the assets, but they needed a little bit of help just on guiding it into the industry itself. We had a lot of mutual friends, and I'm a huge proponent of networking at all levels, at all times, because you never know where the right conversation is going to present itself. In my particular case here, former classmates and colleagues made the introduction with Prosser, the CEO, to myself, suggesting that I might be able to add just a little bit of insight on where we might go with this type of stuff, given my background of working with data, technology, and trying to be on the forefront. That yielded a number of conversations with Prosser, and we were able to get together and determine that I could join the founding team here to try and drive us forward to not only help them apply the technology to vessels, but also how to build the company into something that can really support the industry as a whole.
Yeah, no, okay, that makes sense. And I mean, just had a really good conversation with a company called Robusys Automation, and they're very much in the unmanned vessel space and things. So, do you see that that's a market for you for the targeting, for example, the defense space, and maybe having the solar panels on board different types of vessels as opposed to the main kind of container liners or commercial shipping sectors?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think over time, and I say the industry, but realistically, let's just say the maritime culture, once the maritime culture is able to fully latch on to the idea that the solar panels themselves are a viable solution, well, for one, that will invite so many brilliant minds to enter the space that I have no doubt that the solar panel world will explode with new and exciting innovation that I can't even fathom. So the ability to make things smaller and more powerful will be the natural progression as it is with all technology. And I truly believe that the idea of presenting a power source that is in no way dependent on any other third party, like take, for instance, you're not going to need oil that comes from either the Middle East, America, South America, doesn't matter where. If you're working with solar panels, you have readily available access to an unlimited power source. I think that's a pretty attractive model for anyone specifically in the defense. I also think that when we're talking about unmanned, that's fantastic because you already have the ability to limit the amount of people and the amount of human error that can go into things. So being able to put this stuff out there, it creates an increased safety by reducing the likelihood of human interaction that can be either dangerous and in some cases break things, if we're being honest. So I think it's the very natural progression. Once the culture accepts the solar panels, I do not doubt that it'll be a huge step forward in both defense and, in general, offshore vehicles of all kind.
Yeah. Great, lots of good opportunities there for you guys. Um, okay, so I guess in terms of, I mean, kind of practical use now. I know we talked about some kind of projects you're working on at the moment. Are there any kind of live examples that you can share of where you've implemented the technology or kind of pilots you're sort of running? You don't have to share any company names or anything, but anything you can kind of give an overview of where we are at the moment.
Yeah, so I can tell you a couple of things there. Through confidentiality, I can't disclose the names, but we do actually
Yeah.
have a small container company that's currently in the process of evaluating their deck arrangements of how they would accommodate this type of technology. We've also got a tanker company out of the Middle East that seems almost counterintuitive that an oil tanker company would be very much interested in a solar powered vessel, but I guess there's a value to it everywhere in every part of the industry.
Yeah.
So we're working with a tanker company as well as a small container company that's interested in licensing the technology, which is really exciting for us because we get a lot of feedback on how other mariners view things. Because
Mm.
I myself go into the maritime academies, but I'm not a master. I'm not out there actually sailing on the vessels. So I value their input, 10 times more than my own thinking of how I'd like the industry to run. So it's extremely important. In addition to that, we actually have our prototype up in Boston Harbor right now that we are able to take it out and do sea trials with a miniature array, and we get all the data back to support that we can plug it in, and we could actually run a refrigerated container right now. So I mean, in our inaugural sailings, maybe not the inaugural sailing, but in the first few sailings that we do with our vessel, we'll end up actually putting our small array on there so that we can power a reefer, and we can demonstrate to folks that if you were shipping in this reefer, you have generated zero emissions from that reefer alone, not the propulsion, not the vessel
Yeah.
itself, but from the reefer. So we are prepared right now to make those kind of moves forward, and it's really we're just at the final countdown.
Yeah, no, it's very, very cool. Yeah, I mean, and some of the clients that we recruit for, a lot of their role is not just selling to the ship owners. Sometimes they're also selling to the charterers themselves, like you said,
Yeah,
the oil majors and things. And I think if you can get the buy-in from the charterers to then not insist, but prefer to ship their cargo on vessels that are more sustainable or driving decarbonisation, then it's a win-win, I think, for the ship owners, the charterers, and obviously the technology providers yourself. So, are
absolutely.
you? In that sense, your kind of customer demographic, what type of businesses are you predominantly targeting when you'll be rolling out your kind of test pilots and things?
So when we're looking at the technology itself and looking to try and license the tech out to other vessels, we look at a smaller sized vessel, not because it only works on those, but there is a sweet spot that you can achieve with this where the array is not too large and it
Yeah.
lands in the container world, looking at handy size vessels, anything from 500 TEU all the way up to say 2500 TEU. That's a really good sweet spot for this size vessel with this size of an array. It has an interesting thing that it unlocks the ability for those vessels which are limited in how far and how long they can run if they're running on legacy fuels, where when you unleash that, you can now have a smaller vessel that runs on various other lanes, and you can have kind of dedicated short haul or long haul port to port moves there where it's not necessarily economically viable in its current state. So we target companies that operate with that small size. So if you think of it in terms of, a lot of the Jones Act carriers here in the US, that's the scope there, that size vessel. There are some of the smaller ones specifically over in Europe. We target a lot of the smaller companies, I shouldn't say smaller companies, but the smaller size vessels that do coastwise run. So what we
Yeah.
refer to here in the States as what would be the marine highway and short sea shipping, it's really that hub and spoke model that Europe's been doing forever, that those companies benefit tremendously from it, both because of an operational standpoint of the size of the vessel and also because of the market, the trade and cap, or excuse me, the cap and trade model that they implemented on the carbon credits over in Europe. So they're able to avail themselves of the environmental attribute certificates that get generated from a solar powered vehicle.
And this might be a really stupid question. It probably is. But I mean, obviously, places in Europe, they may not be as sunny as places as Brazil or South America, that sort of stuff. So does that have an impact on the productivity of the panels themselves?
I asked the same question, so I'm going to declare that is not a stupid question. I think that is an
Okay,
accurate
fine.
question and worthwhile to ask. The short answer is weather will dictate the power of the sun there. So I mean, you're going to have times where it's overcast, and it tends to be a little more overcast in northern Europe than it does in say the Caribbean. However, our scientists have explained to me that the concentration of the sun actually it's not necessarily better, but it's more consistent around the equator just because of the exposure it has to the sun. However, because of the tilt of the axis on the Earth, you have seasonal strength of the sun at different times of year in different hemispheres. So the
Yeah.
short answer is yes, there's an impact, but the more nuanced answer is it's an impact, but it's not prohibitive. So we can still run, and we do still have that benefit.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Mhm.
Excellent. Makes sense. Good. I guess now going forward, what type of challenges have you seen, or maybe, or you anticipate as you kind of scale the business going forward?
So, I mean, the trickiest part, it's kind of excuse me, there's two pieces that are the trickiest part, in my opinion. One is the operational sense. The biggest challenge that we're always going to have is the adoption of anything new into the industry. And part of that leads into the second challenge of there tend to be in the maritime space technologists and mariners. And there's not a ton that there's a lot of overlap in those. And the reason why I use the phrase technologist is from a former colleague and mentor of mine who fancied himself a technologist. He was like, I'm a technologist by trade. And he struggled to really wrap his head and understand the culture of the maritime, how transportation people, how do they buy technology? How do they buy software? How do they engage with any new technology that's being implemented? The mariners, we have a strong belief that we've figured it out, and second oldest profession out there, and we've been around for thousands of years. We've got this thing locked. It's a real challenge to find people that are willing to open their minds up enough to accept that there might be a new way of doing anything. So when we look at hurdles, it's the acceptance of new technology and then the people that are willing to actually work with it to refine it and make it better and keep it active in the industry so that people can actually benefit from its existence. I'm not sure if that was clear. I don't want to sound like I'm
No,
being
no,
coy or too high level on it, but it's really hopefully that was
no.
clear.
Yeah, not at all. And I guess the panels themselves, are they bespoke to every individual vessel, or could, in theory, they be used for a certain, like a voyage or a certain amount of voyages, and then moved on to another vessel?
Yeah, I mean, depending on how you are set up, short answer is no. The panels themselves are not bespoke, and to be perfectly honest, our proprietary technology is the application of off-the-shelf panels and our retractable and deployable mechanisms there, and kind of the technology that we're using to pull the power out of the panels. Panels themselves, they're off the shelf. We can buy those in bulk, so you're able to create a pretty flexible array. And flexible meaning it can be used in multiple ways. As far as being able to put it onto one ship and then take it off and put it onto another ship, it really depends on. It's like if you want to have a fixed one where you go into a shipyard and you get retrofitted and it's committed to your ship, yes. If you want to have something that's a more detachable unit there for, say, the charterers that want to do it in the Caribbean and then send it to someplace else without that, yes, it's not a problem. We can do all of these things. It's really just a mechanical question at that point because the technology works regardless of the vessel.
Yeah, that's a great selling point. And from somebody that is selling the solution, and you're kind of, would you say that that's a really a huge advantage that in terms of trying to get traction and build some trust is hey, look, why don't you try attach the panel for one voyage? Let's track the results and compare what it was like on another voyage without the result, without the panel. Is that something you would be doing in terms of pilots and things? Is that how
I
it
think
works?
down the road, I'd say it's a very likely. There's a high likelihood that would be a method that we would apply in the initial phases. And I say initial meaning, let's call it the foreseeable future. For the next few years, probably wouldn't be doing trials that would allow people to test them out, only because it's a pretty high investment to ask anybody to do. So it's like we would have to have them invest not only in us as a company, but also the manpower, being able to make sure that you have the right certifications, which is something that we're currently working with the maritime academies here in the States because we'd like people to be trained on how to work with solar power and really just understand a little bit more about our technology. Uh, It's a lot to ask. I do think though that once we've gotten through our kind of initial phase of rolling this out and showing people, I think that'll be a very likely scenario that people are going to want to be able to say, okay, give us a few flat racks with your array on there. We'll test it out. We'll get the data back, and then we'll see if this is something we could do on a larger scale. I think it makes perfect sense because anytime you're asking somebody to try something new, you should let them at least try it, right?
Yeah, and I know other customers they typically charge for those trials, obviously a bit of a reduced amount. So I think it's a sounds very natural. Yeah, and I guess in terms of the sort of go to market strategy going forward, then obviously this is very very close to your role.
Yeah.
Do you mind me asking what does sort of the next sort of 6 to 12 months look like? Would you say in terms of that kind of commercial outreach?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the next 6 to 12 months, our primary focus is on our line. So on Voltic shipping lines, of getting our trade lanes for the intra-Americas trade, as I mentioned before, Itajai to Norfolk, as well as Altamira to Gulfport, or Altamira and Tuxapan, Mexico to Gulfport, Mississippi, and then also Norfolk to Northern Europe there. A couple of different ports that we're looking at there, Cork as well as Rotterdam. Being able to put those 3 lanes up and running in the next 12 months here, that's our primary goal, because that will allow us to be able to carry the cargo on the smaller vessels and start to show people the benefits of using the solar power, so that you can not only reduce your operating costs through the reduction of fuel usage, but we can also generate the environmental attribute certificates, which allow us to give them the carbon insets that you can then trade on the open market, surrender to the governments if you're on that European trade, be able to generate an additional revenue stream for the line purely by doing the right thing and using the green option. So if we can prove it to everyone through our customers, then the next 12 months will be us trying to see if anyone else is interested, and see how we can get the technology onto other vessels as well.
I think it's really inspiring business you're building, and I'm really hopefully glad we can kind of keep an eye on things and see how you develop over the years. But I mean, in terms of maybe going forward, I appreciate you may not be looking to kind of build out a team right now, but just from your maybe some perspectives and lessons you've learned over your years as a sales leader, if we sort of shift the focus a bit more now to how you've built out those teams, from what you've seen, obviously you've been at Orbit MI and Woodmac and other companies that focus on either the maritime software or the commodity insights world. Have you typically had a preference to the type of background of people you hire, whether it's from industry or more technical, or how have you looked at that in the past?
So, and I apologize if anybody else follows you on LinkedIn, because I've made this comment before, so I hate to be redundant, but I'm going to reiterate now my thoughts on this.
We saw that. No problem.
Is that I am a firm believer that the sales mechanisms, the methodologies that get applied to how to effectively run a sales process, those are highly educatable. You can teach people to be a good salesperson as long as they have that inclination or that desire to be a salesperson. The thing that's tricky is trying to get someone to adapt an understanding of the culture that surrounds not only the maritime, but also supply chain transportation. It's a highly relational business because most of the services are commoditized. You can find 1,000,001 people that can move your cargo from point A to point B. It's all about who do you like working with, who do you trust, how do you enter the market and actually build that rapport. I feel that the best way to do that is to start with an industry background. So people, and I don't mean necessarily they went to the maritime academies so they're trained on how to run on ships, but folks that have been in the business and have spent time trying to build rapport among other industry professionals. They understand networking. They are members of networking groups. Us here in the Northeast, the foreign commerce clubs, the Coalition of New England Companies for Trade, all of these great networking groups, they generate a solid community of professionals that you can not only pull from, but you can also rely on for good recommendations. And I think that is the starting block for all of my hirings. I like to work with people that I like to work with and that other people like to work with as well. It's a absolute bonus if they have some kind of sales background when we're doing sales things, just because it's nice to be able to give someone a leg up as opposed to just build from scratch. However, if you do have to build from scratch, I find it a lot easier to build a salesperson out of a mariner than to try to turn a pure technology salesperson into an understanding of the mariner.
Yeah, and I think that's so true. And I think also it comes back to, like you said from the very beginning, the people that are leading these technology companies, having for example, your expertise from a maritime perspective adds huge value to the team at Voltic as well. So without that piece, you kind of, I think you're not necessarily set up for success, I'd say, immediately. Whereas obviously what you guys are building there, you've got hands-on industry experience, which is super valuable.
Absolutely. No, I'm in a full agreement there. I think the one skill set I think that I truly look for whenever I'm doing any hiring is I'm like, can we sit down? Can we have a lunch and chit chat? Nothing. It doesn't have to do anything with business. Can we sit down and have a good chit chat at lunch there? I think that's a skill, at least from a commercial side. I'm like, that's an irreplaceable skill that you have to have there. We can build almost anything else off of that. So if there's one nugget that I leave with everyone is I'm like, hey, if you can have a good lunch, you can be a salesman.
that takes you back to my shipbroking days. That was often the go-to kind of like final interview stage, either when I was at Clarkson's or before then. It was a huge part of the the role and the networking side of shipping. And I appreciate things have changed a bit, but still incredibly important. And yeah, I
I
understand
have a
why you said that.
long-standing belief that I don't know if things have changed actually at all, and I've long said I was like someday I'm going to write the memoirs and figure I'm like, did we really come that far from our days as like pirates and buccaneers and privateers and whatnot? Have we come that
Yeah.
far?
No, it makes sense. And I think it's still very very popular, and people always want to have that kind of culture fit with, and also just the ability to articulate the value of the solution to the end customer, because the end
Exactly.
customer they may be more than likely a technical director or a super engineer or something
Mhm.
aboard a vessel. There, if you can speak at least a little bit of the language, it's so helpful. Um,
Absolutely. It's very obvious in many cases if you are as I refer to it jokingly, if you're a tourist of the industry and you're just using lingo that you've heard, you're not going to use it correctly. And there's nothing more obvious than when someone's using acronyms incorrectly or they're using the wrong term to describe something, and
yeah,
it takes you out of that moment where you're trying to build that rapport and that understanding. So a little bit of subject matter expertise goes a long way in this space. And then, like we said,
brilliant.
the rapport building and everything like that only drives it home, that much easier. So,
Yeah, it's funny. Even just like terms like brokering or little things like that,
indeed,
instantly like, okay, you read the word, but it's not quite how it's said in real life and things.
absolutely, absolutely. And my other thought that I often bump along with some of my colleagues, more so on like some solutions engineers and some of the more technical folks. We as commercial people, we as salespeople, we don't get to tell people what they should be interested in, and not always the most valuable solution is the most complex. And people really want to talk about the thing that they've solved, like they cracked the code on something. It's amazing. The only problem is if the customer can't associate monetary value to it, they might not necessarily want to hear about that, and it's a tough thing to. That's it. I hate to double back on it again, but once again, the rapport building and the ability to communicate effectively with someone on the fly, that makes all the difference in the world. I need to understand what's most important to you. When I'm out here right now selling Voltic, there are some people that they honestly don't really care about the solar power. They just want to know, are you a good shipping line? And there are some people
Yeah,
that are like, hey, every shipping line's the same, so tell me more about this solar piece. So I have to be able to read that and explain both of those. You have to know both sides of it to be able to talk effectively, but you can't force it. So I think that's also
yeah.
a point worth referencing, but not necessarily my area of expertise. Just to say, I think it's useful.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think also on the flip side is having perspective from people that aren't from the industry, also in the leadership team or even some early hires and things, because they've seen how success has been in different industries and maybe even, yeah, quicker adopters essentially. So I think it's
Indeed.
good to have a balance in ways.
Absolutely. All of too much of anything is a bad thing, right? So you have to have a balance across all angles there. So I think spot on, my friend, spot on.
Yeah, no, excellent. Well, I think from my point of view, I think that's covered most of the topics we're going to run through today. But in terms of anything else you'd like to share about Voltic and the business, anything else you'd like to pass on that perhaps we haven't touched on just yet?
I think we've hit on everything. Just keep an eye out for Voltic there. We're making big moves and we're really trying to make a splash into the market. We've got tremendous support from customers across the board here for various commodity types. We've got endeavors opened up in the tanker market as well. So I mean, we're trying to be movers and shakers. We're trying to do things a little bit differently than the rest of the industry and try to make smaller runs, smaller ships, and be a high touch, high customer service company. So we look forward to speaking with everybody out there in the industry as time progresses, and that's about all I'll have to say on it.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much, Ryan. And if someone does want to reach out and has a few more questions, what's the best way for them to do so?
You can go right to our website at volticshipping.com. You can always contact me at Ryan, at volticshipping.com. But if you go to the website, you can find all of our links and communication information about our runs, our ships, the technology itself there. So please feel free to visit us online, LinkedIn, or directly to Ryan at volticshipping.com.
That's good. All right, Ryan. Thanks so much for your time and for sharing. Yeah, what you guys are building, super impressive and very exciting. I'm looking forward to keeping, yeah, as I said, tracking how things evolve over the next few months. But also, thank you to everyone for tuning in and for listening. I hope you found this exciting and interesting, just as I did. So yeah, we'll speak again soon.
Excellent. Thank you.